The Golden Robe, written and read by Julian Brown. The Golden Robe, Part 8. The Book of Laura. Laura had been entering these semi-sleep trance-like meditative states frequently ever since she last spoke with Leopold, whereby she would relax on her couch or bed, and soon after receive vivid visions and interesting insights. An image came to her mind of her smoking on the lawn of the grove, though in this image she had the point of view of Dr. Mallowan, spying on her from an upstairs window. Through the doctor's eyes, she saw herself sitting on a bench, having a conversation with the empty seat next to her, as if an invisible man sat there. She thought, as Dr. Mallowan, that maybe Laura was using a hands-free set to make a phone call, and reflected, as Dr. Mallowan, that it was difficult nowadays to distinguish between this and someone having a hallucinatory chat with their imaginary friend. She pondered, as Dr. Mallowan, that all this time volunteering at the Grove, all the disturbing confessions and the group therapy sessions, were perhaps beginning to affect Laura's mental well-being. This image flowed seamlessly into another of Leopold in a hooded cloak, walking across a vast, lifeless desert. She remembered the last words she heard him say, "I must return to the desert," and allowed her ignited consciousness to take her on an inner journey of exploration. The desert, where Christ spent 40 days being tested by the devil, a torturous purification process, the dry lake of fire, a place previously full of life, now deserted. Deserter, one who escapes their previous charge, leaves behind war in search of peace. A desert with an extra S, as in what comes after the main course, and one who gets there just desserts. Laura saw Leopold as the biblical Cain, cursed to wander the earth eternally as punishment for slaying his brother Abel, as if God considered a life weighted down by this burden of murderous sin more fitting for Cain than the easy release of death. He who wears the golden robe becomes king. The question Leopold didn't ask was king of what exactly? King of your being, what you are. Leopold, the king of tragic death and pointless suffering. So that became his lot. Why hadn't she thought of it before? Laura typed desert, Leopold, golden robe into the query box at the top of the web page. There were 3 results listed from the search. One was an article from May 1933 from a British magazine called The Occult Review about an Arabian mystic named Ahmed Sir al-Khalika, who was said to be a Bedouin whose family had been in possession of the golden robe for the previous 200 years. According to the article, the robe had had several other owners during this period, who would hold on to it briefly before inevitably handing it back to Ahmed's family when they realized they were not up to the challenge. The second result from the search was a few lines of text under the heading Justice. Laura read them. A house burnt to the ground is justice for the trees cut down to make space for the house. Digestive illness is justice for the chickens, cows, sheep, pigs and fish tortured and slaughtered for our convenience. A flood is justice for the seas, rivers and streams that we pollute with our excessive waste. Human misery is justice for the way that we selfishly exploit the environment and one another. We live in a just world. The sombre, cynical tone was Leopold's, but the words, concerned with justice for the environment, seemed to be at odds with his character as Laura knew him. The idea that Leopold was in fact only that, a character, in her mind, created to fulfill some inner need to make sense of everything, the war, the rising crisis-like state of everyday people, the disappearance of Sedgwick, and the general dreamlike strangeness of reality, was an idea that Laura was taking more seriously now. There wasn't ever a third party who could verify both Leopold and Laura being in the same space at the same time. In many ways, Leopold was more of a caricature than a real person. Surely, reality was a lot more complicated and nuanced, and the idea of some evil rich white man sitting at a shadowy desk, pressing buttons controlling the world, was just the mind, struggling to find a simpler way to understand and process the multi-layered, interconnected, interwoven net tapestry of how the modern world actually operates. Leopold, like his name, was outdated, obsolete, a relic of the shameful past. This is a brave new world, led not by any one person or group, but by algorithms, reflecting the projections of the user. A digital democracy. Well, that's the idea. Random events make reality. What about a hidden hand at work behind all this randomness? What if this hidden hand was connected to a hidden arm, a hidden body, and so on? And what if all this hiding was done in plain sight, right in front of us in the most obvious places we never thought to look? Anything hidden can be found, thought Laura, even that which we hide from ourselves. Laura read the third result from the search, which was titled, "When the Heart Doesn't Dare." He came from far yet near, a place of death and fear. Pursued he has been by the lady of hue, sweet Lorraine, fair and true. For all this time she never knew where he went, though she had a clue. Just as Cinderella left behind her shoe, the stellar flight of Sedgwick left the shine of gold in view, charged with his care and caring too, while adorned in gold, away he flew, to a plain so close you can smell its air. With the eyes of spirit, you can tell it's there. When the heart doesn't dare ever speak its truth, it grows cold, with warmth still leaking through, though from his heart spilled forth, from its well it beamed, and so his thought took form, and beheld its dream. From the base metals of fear, cries and grief, gold in his soul was realized and released. Fear not, though, Lorraine, that you shall not sail, for the stars have confirmed that you cannot fail. Laura read over the poem again. She copied and pasted it from the website into a Word document and printed it out just to make sure it was real. What a coincidence that she would find this poem here on a chat page of this Occult Mysteries website, and that it spoke of someone named Sedgwick who went missing. Lorraine, so close to her own name, obviously referring to her, the Lady of Hue, in pursuit of the truth. This peculiar discovery was the latest in a long line of interesting finds. Laura felt that she was getting nearer to the truth of the Golden Robe. It was as if some unseen force was guiding and willing her along to some kind of victory. She had become entirely consumed by the task, and now that it was the summer holiday break, Laura had much more free time to carry out her research. But why Lorraine? Why wasn't her actual name used? She replied to the post asking questions about the poem. It had been posted only a day ago by unknown user, who had a default blank image as their profile. Of course, it wouldn't be that easy, she thought, though she'd check later to see if she got a reply. The main esoteric reference to the name Lorraine that Laura found was the Cross of Lorraine, a double-barred cross representing the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The Romans would place a sign across the top of the cross with the crucified person's name for all to see, which gave the cross the appearance of being a double cross. Interesting, thought Laura. This had in fact been the first cross to be used bar the Egyptian Ankh, and the Christian cross we are now familiar with apparently didn't come into use until 4 centuries after Christ. A scientific reading of this double cross symbol was that it could very well be in reference to the double helix structure of DNA, or even the XX chromosome of a woman. Another more occult interpretation of the Cross of Lorraine that Laura found was that the first crossbar stood for death and the second crossbar stood for life, as in the resurrection of the Christ. The Christ, or Christos, meaning the Anointed One, had its origins in ancient Egypt, which was described here as the land of Kemet. But what did all this mean for Laura? Had Sedgwick in fact died here, crucified by a miserable, joyless existence, and then been reincarnated in another reality? As she scrolled down the page, Laura noticed a link with the title, "Missing Persons Alive and Well in Another Realm." Another coincidence? Many such coincidences had been happening lately, with Laura only having to think of something before immediately receiving some kind of sign from the external world. She clicked on this link and read about people going missing, presumed kidnapped or killed, who had actually stepped from this world into another dimension or plane of reality. As far-fetched as it sounded, Laura read on. A large percentage of the people who go missing every year, many of them young, are often assumed to have been abducted by human traffickers and sold into the global slavery system. Many such sources have argued that this system simply could not function so effectively and efficiently without the tacit complicity of the elite power structure. While there is much truth to this, as recent scandals involving members of the British royal family and disgraced American billionaires have clearly demonstrated to anyone with an ounce of common sense, it does not account for literally millions of people who have simply left this reality and rematerialized in another one. Evidence for this is found in the testimonies of hundreds of thousands of distressed friends and relatives of missing persons, who state that these persons contact them frequently to reassure them that they are okay. Such communications are deemed by critics of the idea as merely the wishful thinking of people traumatized by their loss and need for closure. Laura decided to take a break. She had been reading all evening. She felt like a cigarette, but had not smoked for 11 days now, which in only half an hour would be 12. She wasn't about to spoil this immaculate record now, so she sipped on some green tea instead, while considering what all this new information really meant. The more answers she got, the more questions she had. These people communicating from other dimensions, if this was so, why were they chosen in particular? In the case of Sedgwick, the poem made it clear that he was in a better place now than he had been before. She reflected on Sedgwick. Was he a good person? Laura didn't remember him being particularly religious or pious. He seemed quiet. Truth is, apart from that, she never knew much about Sedgwick at all. He came into work late, said little to anyone for the whole day, and left as soon as the clock struck 5. The only real emotion she felt towards Sedgwick, while being his supervisor, was annoyance for his late starts, his days off sick, and his general, casual attitude towards his work. In retrospect, no one in the office really took to him. Since he didn't join in with all the office banter and politics, most, if not all, kept their distance and barely acknowledged him. It seemed only a matter of time before he failed his probationary so that management could let him go. Laura realized now that to Sedgwick, she too had been a part of this negative, unwelcoming atmosphere. She had not intended to be such, but she had not made any real effort to be anything else. Who knows what may have been going on for him in his life, with his health, or at home? No one ever thought to inquire. Whomever wears the robe shall rule over the whole of the earth. But what if that's not your thing? What if you don't desire to rule over anything? Cedric, the meek shall inherit the earth. For sake of argument, if Leopold wasn't a real person, then perhaps this document she was reading now was one she wrote at an earlier date and uploaded to the site as an anonymous user, knowing she would finally look on here for answers. But why would she do this? Did she know something deep inside herself that she wasn't aware of consciously? Was this all some elaborate adventure that some submerged, advanced part of Laura's psyche had created for herself to experience, to remind herself, perhaps, of what she's really capable of? Were the nurses being sincere when they looked into her eyes and told her that they didn't know of anyone by the name of Leopold who was staying at the Grove? Or was this all some nefarious, sinister cover-up by the elite that we hear so much about, of which stories are summarily dismissed as the cooked-up fictions of conspiracy theorists? Reality and illusion seemed to Laura to be two sides of the same coin. She knew in her heart, though, that she would find the truth one day, in this life or in another, in this dimension or in another.